I don't know about you, but I have a bad habit of supporting stuff on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and the like, and definitely more often than I should really be doing it with my money. And I'm not always happy with the results either, especially when I support books. I mean, sometimes if I buy a book, the Kickstarter edition won't come with any special extras, and half the time, almost always ends up being cheaper on Amazon because they discount a lot. One of the places though that I have been happy buying things off of Kickstarter, or in this case Indiegogo, is from Dark Regions Press, who published a book. I guess it was last year. It's been sitting on my shelf for a while now. It's called Madhouse, a Shared World Anthology, edited by Brian C. Hodson and Benjamin Kane Ethridge. Anyway, like I said, this is a shared world anthology. Mostly what it consists of is basically a shortish novel that consists of 20 chapters and an epilogue that was written by the editors. And then there are 20 short stories written by various horror authors. Basically all the stories are set in the same location during the same time frame, and they're all the stories are connected to what's going on outside in the novel. This is kind of a weird concept, so why don't I give you a quick reading from the first chapter of the novel part, so you can, tell if it sounds any good.
There was something off about the woman. Mark couldn't place it exactly. Maybe it was the low register of her voice, or how she seemed to drift through the halls rather than walk. Even the visit itself made her seem other. In the 2 years that Mark had worked at Golden Canyon, no one had ever visited John Doe in room B6. "They're expecting a storm tonight," Mark said as he fumbled with his keys. They jangled, the noise echoing down the hall. The woman nodded. She hadn't spoken since he was called to reception to escort her up. The lock clicked. Her face remained blank, another thing that bothered him. She was small, childlike, skin smooth and glowing, dark hair pulled inside a gray hooded sweatshirt. At first glance, he would have said she was a teenager, yet there was something about her, something in the way she held herself, and the coldness in her eyes which suggested she was much older. He found himself wanting to hurry to get the door open and leave her. John Doe sat on the bed like always, knees pulled to his chest, staring out the window at the Arizona desert. The afternoon sun rinsed over his face, coating his pale skin with light. If not for his breathing, it would have been easy to mistake him for a statue. "So, recognize him?" Mark asked the woman. "Is that your brother?" "I'm not sure. Can we have a moment alone?" It wasn't against protocol in the open ward, but Mark still liked to monitor things for a bit before leaving a patient and visitor alone. The eagerness in her eyes made him relent. "I'll be right outside the door," he said. "You need anything, you call, okay?"
Okay, now I actually kind of like that. I thought that was a good lead into the book. General plot of the novel part is this: it's set in a mental hospital known as the Golden Canyon something. I don't know, I forget what term they used instead of nut house or madhouse or mental hospital, or I know they used something, but I don't remember anymore. And there's the patient, John Doe, who you heard of, gets met by that mysterious woman that you also heard in that reading. And somehow this triggers an outbreak of contagious madness. That part kind of reminded me of Pontypool, which was, I've seen the movie, haven't actually read the book, but it's a really good movie that you should watch. I heard the book isn't quite as good, but I haven't read it yet, so I can't say for sure. Definitely on my wish list, though. Anyway, the madness starts spreading through the mental hospital, making the patients who are already insane even more insane, and turning the doctors and nurses and orderlies and security guards and everybody else crazy too. Though, quite frankly, quite a few of them seem to be half crazy to begin with. The main characters were the Mark, who you saw in the reading there, and also who is a nurse, and also a doctor named Alex, who is his girlfriend. I mean, Alice, not Alex. Basically, those two seem to, for some reason, be less affected by the madness than others. The especially Alice is not completely unaffected. She goes a little crazy. But they also spend most of the book trying to either stop the madness or escape. But the whole thing is like almost like some sort of karmic cycle destiny things based on the ancient past, and I didn't really understand it. I don't think I really had to understand it. It was just weird and spooky. And as far as the short stories go, I'm not going to go into detail for 20 different stories because that would make this take like a half an hour, and nobody wants to sit around and watch me babble on for half an hour about a bunch of short stories. So I'm just going to talk about 3 that I really liked. Basically, each one basically focuses on a particular incident involving somebody's madness. I mean, except for 2 stories. I think it's 2. Yeah, there's one story that's basically a couple of them that are just basically more like parts of the novel that are written as short stories by someone other than the writers or something. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I didn't really care for those that much anyway, so I'm just going to talk about 3 of the ones about particular patients' madness that I liked. The first one I came across was Where Immortals Sing in Key by Anthony J. Rapino. Yeah, it's basically about a patient who believes one of the other patients is immortal, but she doesn't, because during the madness, people are trying to kill each other, including trying to kill her, and he's kind of in love with her, and it's all about him trying to rescue her from the Sandman, who is one of the main villains in the beginning of the book. The second story I liked was called Birdman by R.B. Kane, which is about one of the patients who calls himself the Birdman, who basically seems to have been a nut job who liked to kidnap people and take out parts of their body and replace it with bird parts. He's considered one of the most dangerous patients. He's locked in an isolation area there's only one other patient called the Angel, who may or may not be the angel of an actual angel who's waiting on Earth to cause the apocalypse. I thought that was a really good story. Probably my favorite. The other one I liked was called Drake's Cakes by Megan R. Curia. It's about one of a nurse, I think, or an orderly, I forget, named Drake, who basically had no business being in a mental hospital, basically a total bully, and would, rape some of the female patients and generally abuse everybody. And it's mostly about him getting what's coming to him, which is always something good to read. Bad people getting what's coming to them. Now, my overall impression of the anthology is that not all the stories worked all that well in the context of the shared world. Sandman comes up a couple times, and he seems slightly different in each story. But it's almost, I don't know, it might have just been my imagination that he seemed really different in his first appearance and his later ones. I don't know. But overall, I didn't think they all worked all that well, but still, all the stories, taken as a whole, added a lot to the book. If it had just been the novel parts, it wouldn't have worked at all. But put together, they made for a very creepy and disturbing thing that actually left me feeling a bit uneasy after I finished reading it. So, that makes me definitely, this is something I'd recommend, basically, to anybody that likes horror. If you like horror, this is a really good anthology to check out. It's even got some good names as stories. John Skip, certainly one of the more well-known horror authors, been around since, I guess, the 80s, one of the early splatterpunks. There's Jeff Strand is in it, and he writes a lot of great comedy horror, though the story in this isn't really funny at all. There's also Lisa Morton is in it, who I believe is the current, or possibly former, head of the Horror Writers Association. I don't really follow that except for what I hear on the Horror Show podcast with Brian Kane. And it's even got something by Scott Nicholson, who certainly been around for a while, is one of the fairly well-known writer who think he self-publishes most of his stuff, but I read a lot of it, well, some of it, and I've certainly enjoyed it. He's another great writer who's in here. So yeah, this is a great anthology for people to check out, especially if you like horror.
If you like this video, please click subscribe or watch some of my older videos. If you think the book I reviewed sounds interesting, buy a copy. There are always links to the Amazon store in the description for this book and any other books I mentioned. If you have any suggestions on other books I could read, or any other comments, queries, insults, or anything else you want to say, please feel free to mention it in the comments section.